propellant engines that will get Falcon 9 off the ground and up to the thinner parts of the Earth's atmosphere. The two stages will separate from one another. The second stage continues to orbit, while the first stage makes its way back down to Earth for its landing attempt at Landing Zone 4, which is not too far from where it will lift off. And there you can see Landing Zone 4 on your screen now.
So those of you that have never watched one of these, this is a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. It is launching a rocket for the National Reconnaissance Office here in the United States. This is launching from the Vanguard
vacuum engine, or MVAC, about 2.5 minutes
launch site out in
it's this engine that will take
California.
The NROL-87 spacecraft to its intended orbit. At the moment, our payload today is safely enclosed inside the 17-foot diameter payload fairing, which you see there, the structure at the very top of the rocket. This protects the satellite from aerodynamic heating, loads, and contamination during ascent. Once we reach the vacuum of space...
Stage 1, fuel load is complete.
All right, good news there. Stage 1 fuel load has completed. Now, once we reach the vacuum of space, we'll jettison those fairing halves while the second stage continues on to orbit.
All right.
Just like our Falcon 9 booster.
So right now they are actually chilling down the engines with cryogenically chilled fuel. So when the engines are actually fired at launch,
earlier, this mission is for the National Reconnaissance Office, or
the engines
NRO.
won't like fracture from the cold shock. So they actually pump cryogenically cooled fuel through the engines systems to help chill them down. So when they launch, they're already ready to go.
These sophisticated systems are used to develop military targeting data, support international humanitarian relief operations, and assess the impact of natural disasters. As a reminder,
this rocket will be landing back at the launch site about 7 to 8 minutes after launch. Normally what SpaceX does is they land their rockets on a drone ship out in the ocean.
So far,
and then just tow it back to shore. But because of the launch profile and the payload weight, they'll have extra fuel and they'll be able to bring it back to land. If they were flying to a different orbit, or they had a really heavy payload where they had to use a lot of extra fuel,
with respect to weather rules for today,
they wouldn't be able to land back at land. But this specific launch profile allows them to land back at the launch site. So not exactly where they're launching from. They actually have like a landing site a little ways away.
Next up, the truss structure there next to the vehicle, known as
MD, cell D on countdown 1.
GMD. It's a MD.
Is coming through the final status check. You and your team are go for launch and landing.
So that thing that's happening right now, that arm that's going around the right below the fairing, that's the strong back.
The clamp arms on
you'll see that retract back a few degrees to make room for the rocket when it launches.
This is major visual milestones that we have prior to launch. At this point in time, both the first stage and second stage
prior to the launch today, that whole arm actually helps lift the rocket all the way up so it's completely vertical.
The white clouds that you see there on the side of the vehicle are normal. That's just that super chilled liquid oxygen coming into contact with the ambient air around the vehicle.
You'll see those like black streaks on the bottom of the rocket there. Those are actually the rocket's landing legs. So when it comes into land, those will actually
15 seconds at T-3 minutes,
flare out and help it land.
At T-60 seconds, we'll hear a call out, the Falcon 9.
So that first section from the bottom of the launch pad up to that little black ring, that's the first stage of the rocket. That's what will be coming back to land on Earth. Everything above that black ring is that's the second stage of the rocket. That'll go on to go up into space to help deploy the satellite.
Just inside of T-2 seconds.
Oh yeah, Dick Pig, I know all about this stuff. I love space, and I've always loved space travel and rockets and all that. So, if you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
The Falcon 9 team is tracking no issues on the rocket. So So we're about 20 seconds away from second stage LOX load completion. Everything looking really good. As you can see, there's not a cloud in sight. Typically at Vandenberg, we have some fog to deal
not
with.
Vanguard,
so
excuse
to the
me.
area, you're sure to see a beautiful liftoff and landing, as we will be attempting to land back at landing zone 4, which is about 1,000 feet away from the launch pad.
Yeah, so it's going to launch up and then land about 1,000 feet away in about 7 to 8 minutes, depending on the launch profile. Sometimes it's a little bit longer, depending on the trajectory that it takes. So they've now finished loading it with its liquid oxygen. So it runs on what it runs on Kerolox, which is kerosene and liquid oxygen.
The leftover liquid oxygen basically left in the load lines.
So now it's purging all the like leftover liquid oxygen out into the atmosphere. Have I seen The Martian? No, I've never watched The Martian.
On-time liftoff.
When I was in primary school, I'd have been interested, but I drifted away from it forever. I love space films. Well, now's the time. If you want to get back into rockets and space flight, now's the time, because there's so much happening right now with SpaceX and Blue Origin, Virgin Galactic, NASA with the SLS rockets. There's so much going on.
Directors go for launch, and that the vehicle is in startup. The onboard flight computers have taken over the launch countdown.
So that top part there, that's the fairing that holds the payload. So once they're in space, they'll actually jettison those two halves of the fairing, and it'll land back in the ocean, and then they'll go in and pick them up with a ship and bring them back to land, and then reuse them.
Seconds. Let's listen in to the final countdown.
Yeah, I've heard it's pretty factual. I have heard that, yeah. I've heard that the book is really good too.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Ignition. Liftoff of L-87. Go Falcon, go, go.
Vehicles pitching downrange.
So now the rocket has to like pitch over to get to its right launch trajectory.
Nominal first stage chamber pressures.
And now, pigs in space!
Very, very, very good, Big Pig. As if the rocket went straight up, it wouldn't be able to stay in space. It has to go up and then like pitch over. So when it gets up into orbit, it actually starts to orbit the planet.
The NROL-87 mission.
Because the whole goal of rocket launches is to stay in space. So you want to go up and then you want to pitch over.
Which will take place at T plus 1 minute and 12 seconds. Max Q, of course,
if you go straight up, you come straight back down.
Beautiful views of the California coast there in the background.
So what's upcoming is called Max Q. That's the maximum amount of aerodynamic pressure on the rocket itself.
Right,
so they have to actually like take back some of the throttle on the rocket to help take some of the stress off it.
Now the next couple minutes we have
now that they're through Max Q, they can throttle the engines back up to full power.
Second engine start 1, and then the boost back burn.
So
what cut off, as the name suggests, we will we will shut down all 9 Merlin engines. The stages will separate. The first stage will actually flip over and conduct a boost back burn, and that's what we have to do in order to fly the booster back towards land. And of course, during that time as well, we'll have second engine start 1.
So what's coming up now is the main engine cutoff. That's where she said they shut down all 9 engines,
Vandenberg Space Force Base.
And then there'll be a separation of the first and second stage, and you'll see the first stage after it separates. You'll see it do a flip, and it'll fire its engines and come back to get in line with where it needs to be to land. So there's main engine cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
There you go. There's your first and second stage separating. The one on the right is your second stage, which is going to continue into orbit. There's your first stage. You'll see it
all right,
turning itself around.
All of those crystal clear, beautiful views. That first stage now is performing.
Most of that stuff you see in the sky is just like condensation, because they're burning pure oxygen with a little bit of kerosene, so it's not as bad as it looks.
We were able to confirm the deployment of that. We're now.
So now we're on the first. This is a camera from the first stage.
Coming up include the conclusion.
You'll see the curve of the Earth there on the left-hand side of the screen.
Plus 3 minutes and 15 seconds.
So before the first stage comes back into the atmosphere, it actually fires its engines to slow itself down to help ease the heat that builds up on the rocket.
A land landing in just a few moments.
Those little bursts you see, those are cold gas nitrogen thrusters that are helping like turn it in space and get it at the right orientation.
Right next to where it lifted off from.
And then you'll see the things on the right-hand and left-hand side. Those are the little grid fins. That's what it uses to steer itself once it gets into the atmosphere.
Is what determines if we can return to land. Most of the time, their requirements don't allow for a return to launch site, which is what we're performing today, which is why we also developed the capability to land our first stages.
So right now, because they are still in space, they have to use the little cold gas RCS thrusters, reaction control thrusters, to help like spin the rocket around and get it into the right orientation.
First stages out in the ocean with our drone ships.
But once it gets into the atmosphere, they can use the little grid fins to help steer it and get it into the right orientation.
Next up is the entry burn, and that's where we will reignite 3 of the Merlin engines on the first stage.
They are launching a satellite for the National Reconnaissance Office here in the United States. They're a part of the National, they're a part of the Department of Defense. There you go, there's the Earth.
Here we have a beautiful view. I think that's probably one of the Channel Islands there on the right-hand side of the screen. We can see 2 of the 4 hypersonic grid fins. We deploy those shortly after
the
stages separate, and those grid fins help steer the vehicle during descent.
Just to give you a point of orientation,
right there we just saw
these grid fins are near the top of the rocket. So
that is nitrogen gas from attitude control systems that help control the vehicle's orientation.
You live about 10 minutes from the SpaceX headquarters? Hell yeah. In
Vandenberg Space Force Base.
In California, right?
Piece of ice there on the left-hand side.
Oh, the NRO, excuse me.
Absolutely stunning.
Then you must be on the East Coast then.
Both of liftoff and our landing attempt. As I mentioned before, Vandenberg typically has quite a bit of fog, so it's more common to hear a launch than see one from Vandenberg. So for those that were able to catch it, I'm sure it was a stunning sight.
Yep, Northern Virginia, yep.
We are about 20 seconds away from the entry burn. Again, this burn is the second of 3 burns that we will be performing today. And this burn is designed to slow the vehicle down significantly.
Both vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
I don't think I can. Whoops.
We're going to slow its velocity down.
I was going to try to change the quality, but I'll just leave it. So here's the entry burn to slow the rocket down as it comes back into the Earth's atmosphere.
We can see that
so there's not as much heat that builds up on the rocket.
This will last for another few seconds.
Right? Isn't that awesome? So the rocket normally when it launches all 9 engines, but when it comes into land, it only needs 3 of them. And then when it actually comes into land on the ground, it only fires 1 engine.
The vehicle continues to steer itself.
So now you see those little fins on the side that are actually helping like orient the rocket as it comes in to like keep it straight and like steer it. Do I work in aerospace or aviation? No, I've been following this like my whole life, so I'm very passionate about it. I wish I worked in aerospace or aviation.
If you look closely, you should be able to not only see our landing zone, but our launch site as well.
Stage 2 FTS has saved.
The landing zone is pretty close to our launch pad. shortly before the vehicle touches
And what's
down.
cool is if you were on the ground, you would hear 3 sonic booms as it comes into launch, because you'll hear like bang, 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 and then it'll come into land. What's up? What's up, Dansk? How are things, man? Welcome to the channel.
Landing zone coming into view for the first
Now
stage.
you'll see those landing legs deploy right before it comes in.
And first landing attempt.
There you go.
Stage 1.
There goes the landing legs. And touchdown.
And as you can see, a picture-perfect landing of this first stage booster. Its first flight and first landing. This booster will be prepared for reflight on another NRO mission later this year. This also marks our 100th